Hello guys, and welcome back to a new Emma and Paul video. So today looks like we have a new soul exchange, so I'll be going over each of the options from the 10 row, 15 row, all the way to the 20 souls row, and I'll be evaluating and grading each hero and determining whether that hero is worth the price or not. So let's get started. So let's start with the 10 soul heroes. So our first hero is a hero of the month. He is a druid class, slow speed, not that good, not that enough damage to, sustain himself in the meta. But overall, he is not the best pick in my opinion, just judging from his slow speed and the damage that he inflicts is not quite good. Next we have Matilda, who is a Morlovia family hero, and Matilda is a pretty unique hero in terms that the Muffin Fiend that she summons to her enemies, each hit from the Muffin Fiend increases damage from status ailments, so this includes poison, fire, water, the effect where if it gets cleansed and you'll take damage, all of the damage from status ailments, whether it'll be damage over time or if it's cleansed and it'll deal damage, it will go up, which is quite a pretty good effect if you have a strong damage over time hero, or heroes like Pop Hit, Starwalker, Gestalt, for example, Tremor. But overall, I think Matilda is a pretty good choice, and I would recommend picking her if you are on a cheap budget and you have some pretty good damage over time heroes. So I'd say Matilda is a pretty solid option. Next we have Erebus, who is a Styx hero, wizard class. So she is a sniper and a minion counter. So in terms of damage, she's pretty decent, stats slightly low, but overall she is an extremely good pick, but still not better than Matilda, but better than our first hero of the month. Next, the blue hero, we have Himeros. Now Himeros is from the Cupid family of the heroes. She is a rogue class, which is one of the best classes along with the fighter. Stats again quite low. She is running at very fast speed, and she prioritizes Dispel, and then she deals a pretty decent amount of damage. Then she boosts the damage dealt. The special skills deal an additional 40% damage for 3 turns to nearby allies, which is quite decent, especially if you have some pretty strong hitters like Bubbles next to Himeros, also running at fast or very fast speed. So I'd say Himeros is a pretty good option if you do have some pretty good heroes to pair him with in your team. And lastly, in the 10 souls row is Silveria, nature hero, barbarian class, not the best class. But in terms of special skills, stats quite low, but special skills, average speed, only a 380% damage to the target, so that is only a one hit, which for 380 damage, which is quite low. But she summons a minion for all allies with 15% HP and 15% attack inherited from the caster. So I'd say Silveria is still not a good option. I'd recommend saving your souls maybe for maybe if you need a green hero, I'd recommend picking some like Queen Anne, who we will talk about in this later in this video, of course. But I do not recommend either Silveria or Chakazrot. But my overall rankings for the 10 souls row, last place goes to Chakazrot, so he is getting a 5. I do not recommend getting him at all. Next, at 4th place we have Silveria, and I do not recommend getting her at all as well. At third place, I'd say I'd give to Himeros. I can see some people picking Himeros. Maybe they're on a budget, but still I don't really recommend it. But it could be an alternative for you, maybe if you don't have that many souls to trade. But overall, I'd recommend you to save up for 15 or 20 rows and for the next soul exchange if possible. Now, second place, I'd give to Erebus. She is a pretty good sniper and minion counter, but she only hits one, and she also deals a pretty insane amount of damage. Sadly, stats are not up to date, and first place goes to Matilda. She can be pretty devastating when paired with the correct heroes that deal damage over time, like Zizi Jing, Sobek with the sand damage, Khufu, or some of the season 5 heroes who deal the sand damage as their passive. So these are my rankings for the 10 souls row. Next we will be moving on to the 15 souls. So starting off with the purple hero, we have another Styx hero in the form of Nyx. Now, Nyx is actually a pretty good hero. She can be quite devastating if you charge her to the third attack, but I'd say she's a pretty good hero, not because of the damage, but the attack and defense buff and ailments. And at the third charge, just like I said, she can get quite devastating. I don't see as many people picking Nyx as I would thought, since we have some more pretty good or pretty decent options, let's just put it that way, in this list. Next, we have another Lunar New Year hero in the form of Lao Hu. Now, Lao Hu is a monk class, pretty good, and of course, the Lunar New Year family is known for their amazing passive disable minion abilities, but sadly, most of the players in the meta now have either costume Diao Chan or costume Zhu Liang, which makes this passive slightly more it makes this passive slightly weaker, but still a pretty good passive when you're facing like normal Diao Chan's minions or Water Pipe's minions. In terms of special skills, fast speed, a pretty decent snipe, and he heals himself, so I'd say Lao Hu is a pretty good option, especially because of that minion passive. Next, we have a Mighty Pets hero in the form of Barkley. Now, Barkley, fighter class, very survivable. He lacks in stats, but in terms of special skills, I'd say he is an extremely good hero to use in offense. But overall, I think he is not the best hero in this list. Next, we have Miriam and Midnight. Now, when she was first released, many people used her as tank, and to be honest, she was quite annoying, but she only works if your opponent doesn't have a Lunar New Year hero or a minion destroyer hero. But Miriam and Midnight is a pretty good minion hero, especially at tank, because she is running at average speed. She summons the minion heals by a whopping 22%, but again lacking in stats. And lastly, on the 15th row, we have Queen Anne. Now, Queen Anne cleric class with the mana shield, pretty useful. Slow speed taunt, but for 6 turns. And then she also regenerates HP to herself, which makes her even more survivable. Next is where she actually shines. She gives all allies plus 65% defense for a whopping 6 turns and a whopping plus 44% mana generation for another 6 turns, which is quite insane because 65% defense is a lot. 44% mana generation is quite a decent amount, and all of this is 6 turns duration, which is quite good, especially for a slow speed hero. Now, this includes herself, which can make her charge even faster. Pair it with legendary troops or a bard hero or mana troops. This would be an extremely decent skill for you to have, especially if you don't have taunt. I would highly recommend picking Queen Anne, but again lacking in stats. So overall for the 20 souls row, my I think we have a tie for first place, but the last option, the one I do not recommend, is Nyx. So she is getting 4th place. Now Nyx herself is a good hero, but now featured in this list of heroes, she just doesn't make the cut. Now for our 3rd place, we have Barkley, pretty good attack hero, but again the stats and the fiend can easily be get rid of. Next, for 2nd place, I would recommend picking Miriam and Midnight, but in one scenario that I do not want you to pick this hero is if you're facing a lot of Lunar New Year heroes and they're quite annoying, and you already have a lot of minion heroes. I do not recommend picking this hero because that's just making yourself more vulnerable to those Lunar New Year heroes. And now for our 1st place, depending on your choice, roster, or preference, let's just put it that way, is Laohu and Queen Anne. Laohu, of course, with that amazing passive, and Queen Anne, 6 turns taunt, defense, and mana generation, just amazing heroes. So this is my rankings for the 15 souls hero, and at the end of the video I will be giving my overalls to all of these heroes. Next, we'll move on to the 20 soul heroes. So our first hero is quite surprising. It is Costume Guardian Panther. Now, believe me or not, Costume Guardian Panther is used by some players in the meta. I've seen players in the meta use Guardian Panther on attack teams before, pair with some pretty good hitters of the dark element. But Guardian Panther is definitely a solid pick, maybe the best out of this whole soul exchange. Next is, I have no idea what's his name and how to pronounce it, but he is a monk class, very fast speed, deals damage to all, then gives the ailments, but he is quite good as an ailment giver, but very fast speed, 200 damage to all enemies, and with those stats is not quite a devastating amount of damage. So I'd say you can't rely on him that much. He is probably more leaning to the 15 souls than Laohu. I think Laohu should be at 20 and this guy should be at 15, since you can't really benefit from 200 damage. It's just too low to survive in the meta today. Next, we have a pretty surprising option of Phonexa. Now, Phonexa is a bard hero, so the solo heroes get plus 5% mana generation, which is quite decent and one of the best family bonus in the game, in my opinion, since this whole game just revolves around mana. Again, stats are quite low, but in terms of special skills, average speed, decent health recovery, the buff is reset, the duration of buffs, my apologies, is reset for all allies. You get plus critical chance and you get plus attack, so pretty good all-rounder hero, all-rounder defensive hero, I shall say. So I'd say a lot of people will be picking Phonexa. Our next option is Tinsel. Now, I actually have Tinsel, and to be honest, she is quite a good hero, but not nowadays. Still running at fast speed, decent damage. The elf minion does really help a little bit with like the meat shield effect. That's normally what I call minions. But the thing that I like about Tinsel is the ice shield defense and accuracy thingy. I think it just helps her do even more damage, and she's pretty devastating if paired with the correct heroes or have the correct team synergy. She can be quite devastating, especially when paired with heroes like Starwalker or Pophit, also running at fast speed. So I'd say Tinsel is a pretty good option if you do have Starwalker or Pophit. Morel or Costume Morel could be a pretty good option if you do not have Tinsel or you couldn't afford Tinsel. But overall, she is a pretty decent hero. Lastly, we have Green Knight, fighter class, extremely annoying with that revive. One time he was like reviving like 5 times, and then I keep taking damage because I have minions, and he keeps reviving, and then tile combos. He's just so frustrating to deal with. I almost lost to Green Knight just because of the resurrection effect with the damage and the health. So he is quite an annoying hero to deal with, but of course you can dispel this effect and work around killing Green Knight. So he is not an effective hero to use or to even choose anyways. So my overall rankings, first place goes to Guardian Panther, of course. Second place I'd say goes to Phenexa. Third place we have Tinsel. Fourth place we have Green Knight, and fifth place we have I can't read his name guy. But overall, I'd say Guardian Panther is the best hero in the Soul Exchange. But now is overall ranking time. So my first recommendation is, of course, Costume Guardian Panther. She is an amazing attack hero. Next, we have Phenexa. She is one of the best healers, especially in red or in the fire element. She is a pretty good supporting hero and just overall a defensive specialist. Next, for my third recommendation, we have Laohu. Of course, that brilliant passive, extremely good in most situations when you're going up against those annoying minion heroes. So next is I'm having a hard time choosing these rankings. Next, I think I would have to give to Tinsel. She is a pretty good damage dealer, and that defense down can trigger Star Walkers or Pop Hits effect, and they are all running at fast speed, so that should be a pretty good combo. So I do recommend picking Tinsel only if you have Star Walker or Pop Hit and no other blue fast speed to pair them up with. Next, for my fifth recommendation, we have Queen Anne. So Queen Anne is a pretty good taunter. I'd recommend picking Queen Anne if you don't have a decent taunter, but the downside is she is running at slow speed. Now please do remember that this is just, in my opinion, your personal ranking might be different. Maybe you have these heroes, your roster is slightly different, or your perspective on these heroes is just slightly different from mine. It's completely fine. This is just my perspective or my view on these heroes and how they fit well in my roster. So sixth place, I think I will give to Barkley. Now Barkley is a pretty good attacking hero, especially in Rush maybe, but his fiends are pretty easy to get rid of. But overall, I'd say he is still usable, but not in the top meta. If you're looking for an aggressive red hero, Barkley might be the pick for you. Next, we have Green Knight at 7th place. I might have swapped Barkley and Green Knight, but I think I'll change that. Guardian Panther at 1, Phenexa at 2, Laohu at 3, Tinsel at 4. Who did I put at 5? I think Queen Anne at 5. 6, Barkley and Green Knight. I think it just depends on your roster. They have like equal value in my opinion. Next, this might surprise you, but I think I might have to go with Matilda. I think 7th place goes to Matilda, Nyx, and Miriam and Midnight. Just depends on like your playing style. If you want a buffer or a hero that does ailments, Nyx is a good option. if you're a pretty like low level player, I would say Miriam and Midnight would help you a lot, especially in defense and racking up those golden cups. But if you're still an average player and you like playing with ailments and damage over time, and you have a lot of heroes that does damage over time, I think Matilda is a pretty good option, especially at 10 souls. But please do remember that these heroes are all lacking in stats. Now at 8th place, I think it's just wrong to put No Name Guy at like 9 or 10th. But No Name Guy is getting 8th place mainly because his ailments is quite good. He is running at very fast speed, but the 200% damage is not a huge factor. Like, it's barely any damage if you put it up against like meta heroes nowadays. It'll just be like 150 damage and that's it. There's no way you can like benefit hugely from 200% damage, but overall he is a pretty good ailment giver. Next, 9th place, I think I'm gonna have to give to Himeros and Erebus. Now the rankings might change when I wrote it in like overall categories, so 10, 15, and 20. But remember that these heroes I am judging, so when people actually summon or trade for these heroes, I will think what are the chances that other people, who would the majority of the people choose depending on the price, the value, the stuff. This is just my opinion on who is the best heroes, not who is like most get your bang for the buck thingy. But 9th place I'll have to give to Erebus and Himeros, and again depends on your playing style. 10th place I have to give to Silveria, and last place goes to Chakasurat. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video. And please do remember that this is just my opinion. Feel free to pick your hero of choice, and feel free again to leave or save your souls for the next soul exchange, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.